So yeah, really informal. I am just going to chat about what we've done at the Whitworth in terms of the family volunteering. Any questions as we go through, feel free to raise your hand or pop them in the comments in the chat, and we can have a look at them afterwards and have a little discussion around them. So yeah, so basically I started a family volunteering program back in 2018. It was in the Easter. I'd actually come back off maternity leave from my first little girl, and whilst I was off with my little girl, I ended up volunteering at my local public hall. So they were looking for a receptionist on a Tuesdays to come and help out with their Wellbeing Tuesdays that they were holding. But obviously I had my baby with me. So I asked them, is it okay if I bring my baby along? Because it was working on the reception. It wasn't too much physical demanding, it was being in one space, and I figured, why couldn't she come with me? Because I wanted to come and volunteer whilst I was off on maternity, because, you know, us volunteer managers, it's never an off day, is it? So yeah, so I ended up volunteering for them every week with my little girl. I have to say, when she hit 6 months, it became a bit of an issue, because that's when she was crawling and I couldn't any longer stay in one position. But it worked really well for me. And I think in terms of, I just wanted some adult engagement, actually, sort of selfishly. You know, you spend a lot of time with your baby, and when you're at home, it can be quite hard. So I felt like I needed that for me, and also to be able to help out to somewhere locally to where I lived. Normally I wouldn't be able to have that time to be able to do that because I work full time. So when I went back to the gallery, I had a discussion with our family coordinator at the time, and I said, why don't we start opening it up for our baby sessions? So we already had quite a successful baby program, early years program at the gallery. We used to run every Monday. We'd do a full day of an early years atelier, and then which is like an art sort of studio drop-in. And then we had an art baby, which was basically setting up an area in the art galleries for any mums and dads and carers to come along with their babies and engage in activity, meet other like-minded people, and then join in the art activity. So it was already, the programme was already there. So we thought, if we have our volunteers in place that are welcoming our baby volunteers, then it would be really nice. So we tested it out to begin with our current volunteers that we'd got on board. So we welcomed them to bring their babies along. So obviously you might be thinking, what are the babies going to do as a volunteer? We got them in volunteer t-shirts. So for starters, it was super cute to have the little babies in volunteer t-shirts, and the parents loved that. So there was lots of pictures being taken, but it was a really nice conversation starter. So we actually just found, in really sort of simple terms, having that one parent or carer there with their baby, both of them with their volunteer t-shirts, they just greeted all the participants that came in, because it was quite a sort of fluid activity, and they could go over and chat with them. They normally spoke about having babies and went on to that conversation straight away. But it was really nice to be able to have that as a starting point. We'd given them, obviously they already had quite a lot of information about what we do at the gallery. They'd been inducted already, so they knew about all our other activities that go on, so they would be able to signpost those parents to the other activities. So for us, it works perfectly, really. And that kind of spread quite quickly. A lot of people were really interested in taking part in that. So we had a really good group of parents. I have to say, admittedly, it was mainly mums. We have since tried to engage more dads in it, but not successfully so far, just because we got hit with COVID, obviously, before we could really start getting into things. But the parents that we did have involved were brilliant. So that was a really good starting point for us. We then wanted to expand it to our family programming, so our older children getting involved. So again, we trialed this out during an Easter activity, we have a learning studio at the back of the gallery. So again, I've got some of our regular volunteers to bring along their grandchildren or their children. So it started off with one of our volunteers bringing on her grandchildren who were twins, and they were 8 years old at the time. So they came along during the holidays. She was looking after them anyway. So for her, it was a really good chance to be able to volunteer and also have her grandchildren with her and do an activity with them. They started off quite shy, obviously. They had no idea what the grandma was dragging them into. I think at first they were a bit like, why are we here? But I always started off with, right, you guys are in charge of fun. So it kind of loosened them up a little bit. And I think when children that age in particular are sort of given some responsibility, they really do then find their confidence a little bit more. And by the end of the week, because they ended up doing 3 days for us that week, they were engaging the younger children, they were setting up activities for them, they were involving everybody, they were actually greeting people as they came through the door and telling them what we were doing. So it was quite a hands-on activity. We were making dens, so it worked perfectly for those family volunteers. And yeah, they were really good. Obviously, we didn't give them the extra responsibilities that we would give other volunteers. It was literally, yeah, they were in charge of fun. They were there to play. But again, they had the t-shirts on. They were sort of representing the gallery. So I said, like, you've got to make sure you're on your best behavior. And then also we were able to have that sort of flexibility in terms of, whenever they needed to have a break, whenever they needed to have lunch, it just happened when they needed it. So we didn't give them any scheduled breaks, what we would normally give for the volunteers. We were super flexible with them. If they needed to go off and just do their own thing for a little bit, we could do that. So I'd say, like, in terms of what we've learned from the start of it, we had to make sure that we then had enough volunteers that were on that more of a structured session and shift that could cover that, to be able to give those family volunteers that flexibility. So yeah, as a trial, that started off really well. As I say, it was only 1 or 2 people. So then in the summer, we opened it a little bit further. So we did a sort of targeted recruitment. So it was a group of families that we already engaged through our cultural activities in Manchester. We kind of did a call out just to them to say if anyone's interested in doing family volunteering, and the response was crazy. It was just on a Facebook call out, but I think it was just in terms of them seeing that was an opportunity, people really loved it. They were like, that's brilliant, because obviously, as we all know, it's a big barrier, and that's the reason why we did it as well, because people wanting to volunteer and have a family, it's hard for them to find the time and make the time. So that was the sort of original purpose of it. So having the response that we got from just that call out on Facebook showed us that there was that opportunity out there. I have to say, when it came to the actual signing up to do it, obviously, as we all know from original call outs, it then dropped significantly, but that was no bad thing. So we only really wanted to engage 5 families during the summer, just in terms of our capacity and how we welcome them in. So we welcomed them to a family-friendly induction. So when we had our normal induction for all the volunteers, they came along to the same one, but within that induction, we had an area for the children to play. So we set up a couple of different areas. So we had an area we had like babies and toddlers attending with their parents, so they could sit at the front of the hall where we were presenting, and we had some playthings out for them so they could sit and play. And then also for the older children, we had some colouring things out for them, so that, that when we were covering the sort of, the shifts and how people sign up and the bit of health and safety, they didn't have to sit through that in the chairs formally like the other volunteers. You can make it a bit more playful. And then we took them on the normal tour around the gallery, as we do with all the volunteers. And then they could sign up to whatever shifts they wanted during the summer. And again, with that super flexibility of come whenever you want, obviously let us know if you need to leave at any point. Obviously with babies, often some of them were late or didn't turn up at all. That was absolutely fine. We made sure and communicated that there was no pressure. We didn't anyone ever to feel like stressed that they couldn't turn up, and we'd say like, it's covered if you can't come for any reason, we've still got enough people, it's never, you know, we're never going to be short. And obviously they were just additional on top of the staff support that we have during the summer as well. So we had a really good mix that summer. We had babies, so the youngest baby we had was actually 12 weeks, which was amazing, like literally baby in arms. And then the eldest sort of young volunteer was 14. And it was quite interesting because the 14-year-old obviously came along with their mum, but then actually it gave them that bit of independence. They would go off on their own even though their parent was around, and it gave them that bit of freedom to go and do something for themselves as well. And they came into their own during the summer as well, because they ended up really getting into chatting to the members of public. So yeah, so the reasons why I started it was the barrier to the volunteering. We already had a programme that was set up that was, you know, really sort of conducive for involving family volunteers. We've got a really good team that were really open to it. So I have to say, I couldn't have done it on my own. So the family coordinator that we have, the early years coordinator, we're really supportive of it, because it does take up a lot of your time, a lot more time than you sort of average volunteer, obviously having a group with you. And obviously initially we thought it would just be for babies under 6 months, because a lot of them were carrying them, but then it's expanded and we've actually welcomed all the different ages. And as Rob mentioned as well, we've since had grandparents and then people volunteering with their parents as well. So we've currently got a volunteer that volunteers with her mum. So she's in her 30s and mum's older, and they volunteer together, which is really nice. So they've done that together as a time for them to spend together and an experience to share together, which is really lovely. I would recommend trialling it. So obviously we trialed it with our current volunteers. So that worked really well. They already knew the system, they already knew how we work, so they could just bring along their children or any other members of their family. And the reason around sort of making the kids in charge of fun just gave them that sort of opening for them to really be able to get involved. Giving them the t-shirt really helped as well. I have to say, like, that was a really big thing, them having that identity around, you know, they were quite sort of proud putting the t-shirt on and they were the part of the team. Some of the kids loved that they were wearing the same clothes as their mum. So that was quite cute. So yeah, so it's been sort of very fluid as I've gone along, in terms of looking at the side of the risk assessments and things like that. Obviously it's all been added to the risk assessments. We've cleared it with the Whitworth, a part of the University of Manchester. So we obviously would looked at the duty of care around child protection. But obviously with the volunteers, if they're under 16, they would be volunteering with someone that's over 18. So that was the sort of basic point that we had. You must have someone there that's with you, that's a guardian or a parent that is over 18. So we had a young girl volunteer with us sort of later on in the year. I think it was the following February half term. She was only 19 and she volunteered with her niece. So that was quite interesting, because she found out that you could bring along your family, and she's like, oh, actually I've got to look after my niece, but I'd still like to come in. And that was really great as well. So sort of having a younger person with an even younger person was really lovely and quite sort of endearing as well. And for them, that sort of relationship was really nice. Them having that flexibility was really key, in terms of them being able to leave when they needed to and not having to do a full shift. Our shifts are normally sort of 3 hours, but they perhaps come for an hour. So yeah, that fluidity definitely really helped. So in terms of the sort of next steps that we had, we were then part of the NCVO research called the Family Affair. So Rob, on it already. There we go. So yeah, we were part of that research. So we got approached by NCVO because they had, so he's popped up on the chat. Sorry, I should have said then, me just randomly saying Rob being on it. So there's some really good information and really good case studies on there. And actually we found that the progression of the family volunteering really started picking up just, you know, through word of mouth really, and for other families that were coming into the gallery, seeing the other family volunteers and the baby. I think at the beginning, the babies wearing the t-shirt was quite a big thing, as you can imagine. Quite a lot of mums are like, I want to volunteer just for the baby t-shirt. So, but then obviously then as we got sort of further down the line, people were really interested. So we got people approaching us just through that, for them seeing them visually. We had just to be really careful about the numbers again, because I think if we'd taken on as many people as that were interested, it would have been too much for us. So yeah, it was very time consuming, and is, you know, a little bit more work than perhaps you would put into a general sort of call out and recruitment of volunteers, but totally worth it. And we'll be doing it again this summer. So we've actually just got 2 family volunteers groups coming in this summer, just as we start back up again, because we've not had them since before pandemic now. So yeah, this summer will be the startup of it again. So I will report back onto how that goes. We also did a little write-up for kids in museums. So I'll pop that in the chat as a little sort of case study again of what we did. So yeah, so I will stop there because I feel like that's enough talking from me, and we'll practice.